thing.
I don't know if
and
those
I'm-
those marks were on your, what is that? Is that on
Well,
your
that's
screen?
because she just.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hutchinson City Council meeting for Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. Approve the council agenda and any agenda additions or corrections.
Mayor and Council, I've got actually two items that we need to have removed. The item number 12 and number 14. I understand there's still some conversations going on with the business owners, so we're not ready for those approval.
Make a motion to approve that with those corrections, removing 12 and number 14.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mary, second by Chad to approve the agenda with corrections. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Invocation is from Christ the King. Good evening.
Good evening. Pastor Steve Alcott, Christ King Lutheran Church. I wrote everything down because I wasn't sure if my brain or my lips were going to be frozen tonight with the way the cold is. A reading from Isaiah 55. Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you'll have no money. Come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread, and your labor on what does not satisfy? Listen to me, and eat what is good, and you will delight in the riches of fare. Give ear and come to me, listen that you may live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful love promised to David. See, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a ruler and commander of the peoples. Surely you will summon nations you know not, and nations you do not know will come running to you, because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel. For he has endowed you with splendor. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake their ways and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on them, and to our God, for he will freely pardon. The word invocation means the act of invoking something or someone for assistance or as an authority. And I think so often people think that to call on God means that by some magic he's going to come and make everything perfect and solve everything the way we think it should be, that if we can get God on our side, that we'll be able to do anything. But I think when we're speaking about God and we're calling out to God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in this context, in this meeting, it means that we recognize that in leadership we've been entrusted by God, a community, and that it is our job, whether as pastor or city council member, to serve our community in humility and compassion. And I think Abraham Lincoln said it best when he said, "My concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right." And so we want you to know we pray for you. The community gives thanks to God for you, and we pray for you. So let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for these leaders. May they serve all the people of Hutchinson. May they work hard together and seek you always. And we give thanks, Lord, for their leadership. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Merry Christmas. God bless you guys.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Next is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Recognitions of gifts, donations, and community service to the city. Does anybody have anything tonight? Alrighty, public comment, citizens addressing the city council. Alrighty, approval of minutes. We have the regular meeting minutes of November 26, 2019.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, second by Chad to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consent agenda, this will be done with one motion unless somebody pulls something off for discussion. A is approval of the 2020 license renewals. B is approval of resolution number 15117, resolution transferring funds to the 2019 construction fund, general fund, and the capital project fund. C is approval of city assessment agreement with McLeod County for 2020 services. D is approval of purchase of a 2020 Case 621G wheel loader. E is approval of items for Main Street reconstruction, letting number 1, project number 20-01. Under there is resolution number 15118, resolution ordering preparation of report on improvements. And resolution number 15119, resolution receiving reports and calling hearings on improvements. F is approval of resolution number 15120, traffic control resolution, removal of no parking school days 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Lakeview Lane Southwest. G is approval of Altel Corporation Small Wireless Facility Coalition Agreement. H is approval of issuing temporary liquor license to Hutchinson J.C.'s on February 29th, 2020 at the day's end. I is a reappointment of Anthony Hansons to the Hutchinson Utilities Commission to December of 2024. And J is claims appropriation contract payments register A. Is there anything anybody wants pulled off?
I have a few.
Okay.
A couple of them quick, but B, as in boy, D, E, and G.
I'll make a motion to approve the balance.
I'll second.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to approve the balance. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Steve?
Item B, I was just wondering, with the stormwater, it mentions like the Fifth Avenue and South Grade projects, but stormwater seemed a little higher. Was that part of the pond project as well?
No, maybe Kent can speak a little further to it, but with the South Grade Road, I believe that was very heavily or extensive on the stormwater infrastructure side of things.
Yeah, likewise, Fifth Avenue was also, but yeah, South Grade was the vast majority of it. Yeah, the revisions to the stormwater sewer system. So we base it off of the actual unit prices and the construction bids, and in particular, like Andy mentioned, the South Grade Road unit prices for the stormwater work were high.
And that's what, I went back and looked at what we saw at the projected costs at the hearings. That one stood out as being quite a bit more, and I know the project was more, but I didn't know if that was part of it or not. So-
Yes, stormwater design, stormwater, sewer design, I'll call it, gets a little bit to be a moving target. Really, you don't know what the final design is until you get to the very end. And,
Might be
we put some ballpark numbers on it, and like I mentioned, what we're seeing, Steve, lately is really, all construction costs are going up, but in particular, utility costs are going up, sewer, water, storm sewer. And, I think just by how the contractor bid the project, in particular the South Grade Road project, those unit prices for the storm sewer work were high, yeah.
Maybe as part of the bid approval or the project approval, it might be nice just to, okay, these are the cost breakdowns that we saw were presented earlier, and now that's how it, after we get the final bids, it might be nice to have that broken out again, just for an awareness.
Yeah,
Like, and that one in particular was quite a bit more, and didn't know if it was the roadway or whatever, so.
yep, and
But that's all I had.
yeah, and that gets reflected, and you're aware of this as we work through the infrastructure program, through resource allocation committee. you know, that's always evolving until we get to the very end, and then,
Yeah.
you know, Andy and I make some decisions, you know, with respect to funding and, you know, if we're gonna pull fees or take fees away from projects and balance that, but yeah, no, we can do that for sure.
That was it. Make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Motion by Steve, second by Dave to approve item number B. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Steve again.
D, I guess it was more for Matt. When I looked at this, I know the fleet policy was gonna be looked at more, and just kind of wondering where this, I mean, if anything more has been done with that yet, and where this one in particular, it seemed like it was getting digged more based on the age. Condition wasn't so bad, it was average condition, and so just, we got another big one, next year, right, too, so just wondering, since these funds are always under pressure, if delaying, I know this one, we get a little discount, if we do it now, but,
By coincidence, Steve, and I know John isn't here, Andy might be aware of this, I don't know if John's mentioned, but we did have some issues with the wheel loader during this recent event that this loader's replacing, some
Okay.
rather significant issues, so, John's anxiously awaiting this piece of machinery, so.
Yeah, but from the policy standpoint, those are still moving forward, and I think we're looking at probably January. We
Right.
talked about having that policy come back.
Early first quarter, I have some revisions that I need to send to Matt and get his thoughts on it. The fleet committee has already gone through the policy, and I just need to write that up for Matt, to put it in a format that he can review. But yeah, I think Kent hit this one on the head. There was actually another wheel loader that's a year older than this one we're getting rid of, but this one did have some issues with it, and I believe that's why we escalated it ahead of the other one. But we do have a queue. I think each of the next 5 years, we have at least one major piece of heavy equipment, whether it's a snowplow or a wheel loader. So if we delay this, we're just gonna have the funding issue in the next year or out years as well. We do have money sitting aside for this, so we will pay cash. We won't have to finance. In fact, I think next year we'll be able to use cash as well for the heavy equipment. So then we'd be looking at possibly financing heavy equipment again in 2 years, which would fit real nice with the last financing we did, which will be fully paid off, I believe, at the end of 2021. So then we could, if that's the way we want to go, or the decision we want to go, that financing would just fit seamlessly right behind the last financing we did.
It's good. When I started looking at what the projections were in 2022, it looked like we'd be in a negative situation then, but that's where you said that would open that up to possibly finance the heavy stuff. So,
Correct.
okay. Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Chad to approve item number D. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Steve, E.
On E, on the resolution, there's 2 accessible costs. I guess I was just curious why on that.
On the resolution.
Or the printout, I gotta find it too, so,
Oh, okay, the estimate here.
yeah.
Ah,
120,000 and
yes. I did label.
400,000.
Good catch. The top one is we call the general roadway assessment. That's basically the lineal footage, the front footage assessment.
Okay.
That's gonna be assigned up and down Main Street downtown here. And then the other accessible cost is for the utility services.
Okay,
So basically, there's 80 pairs of utility services out there, and what we communicated at this point is 2,500 respectively for the sewer and water service, so 80 times 5,000.
Yeah,
It's either 400.
okay.
Yeah, I should have labeled that. Good catch, Steve.
Okay, motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, second by Chad, to approve item number E. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And the
G.
last one, just had some questions on that co-location agreement. You know, right in the top, it talks about attachment on city-owned infrastructure or collate small wireless facilities, so that again is attaching, you know, to a light pole possibly, or co-locating. Would that be like the boxes or wiring or any
Yep.
of that other necessary stuff?
If you, I don't know if anyone's noticed, there's a few of the small cell crazies, I guess, that have worked on this stuff. Menards has one, there's one out in front of Best Buy, they're actually on light poles. So if you're curious of what they actually look like, there are a few in town now.
Okay.
They're on private property, but Alltel installed those as well. Verizon, I guess you refer to them here locally. Yeah, it's boxes, panel antennas, they're smaller, but they basically strap right onto a light pole, right below the light or above the light, depending on the type of pole that you have. In the discussions that we've had relative to actually co-locating on city infrastructure, there's very few locations that could be potentially applicable because we have so many of the 16-foot acorn fixtures. Those just aren't conducive to having co-locations of small cells on them. There are a few out there. Verizon hasn't expressed any interest on putting anything on any poles at this time. This is a proactive approach. They're trying to do this in as many cities as they can, get their actual co-location agreements in place, so that when they identify sites, that part of it, they've worked out all the language, all the terminology. Those things have already all been addressed in advance. So once they identify the sites, the city confirms that those sites are validated or able to be co-located on city infrastructure. Then you would implement individual supplements for each location. And then if they came back 5 years from now and wanted to do a couple more on additional city sites, then you would just implement additional supplements. You wouldn't have to go through that whole new agreement each time. So yeah, there are a few in town if you're curious on what they look like. You'll see them when you see them.
Number 5, if you have that, it talks about not holding either party liable, and it's like for loss of data or service, things like that. What if there are interferences? I mean, what if they put up something and there's an issue? Aren't they liable? They're just not holding us liable then?
Correct. By our ordinance, we actually have language in the ordinance that addresses that. If interference is determined even after installation occurs, if you don't anticipate there any problems occurring, but something does come up, then that onus ultimately falls on the actual carrier to identify what the interference is, how to correct it. That might even include up to relocating that site to eliminate that interference depending on what it is.
Yeah.
So that's identified in our ordinance. Doesn't necessarily address that here, but yeah, in essence, I think Mark could maybe touch on it too. But yeah, we're basically holding each other harmless for those installations.
Okay. I noticed in number 6, I wondered about if they needed they should have a study, interference study, but I did notice later on, it actually mentions that again, that could be required.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Number 10 talks about any damage to the city's infrastructure, equipment, or what if there's issues with private property? I know it's city right away, but not knowing what might be there, so.
Probably a question above my head, I guess, as far as if that equipment falls down and lands on Skippy. I don't know. I'm not sure how we would address that. I think maybe I'll defer to Mark on that one.
Yeah, it would be situation dependent. Obviously, someone's going to try to make a claim against both the carrier and us if possible.
Oh, so So I guess if it's on our structure, then, but if it's on their structure, they might have to add their own pole.
Right.
And you know, just what you said there, people will probably go after both of us. Should there a hold harmless be?
About how the structure was maintained and
Yeah,
things of that nature.
so we can't have a hold harmless. We cannot. Okay, just wanted to ask. In number 11, it talks about the fees. Well, that's the first part of it, and it refers back to state statute. What if statute changes? Should there be a out or something in there in case it changes and they allow us to increase that?
Yeah, it was one of the questions as we worked through this with Verizon, as we addressed that, in that very sense, is that we would actually reissue or go through and amend the actual co-location agreement. So if the statute changes to allow cities to ask for more money, this is specifically for permit applications, which is also referenced in statute somewhat as a guide, but yeah, if we needed to increase that actual permit application fees, and likewise, as we get deeper into the agreement, it actually talks about rent. If statute is revised to adjust that upwards as well, Verizon says they are definitely open to revising and amending the agreement to reflect those changes if they go up, or vice versa if they go down.
But it doesn't say that anywhere in here. I could see there's no, it's kind of like in perpetuity that this is.
Yep, and the other part of it too gets back to the supplements as well.
Yeah.
When a supplement is put in place, whatever I believe, my understanding is that the permit application fees, the actual rent amount, that number gets set for that specific site. If the co-location says it's going to be $175 annually for these 3 sites that are implemented, and 3 years later, all of a sudden statutes amended to say, cities, you can now charge $500 per site, we wouldn't allow Verizon to co-locate at that $175 rate. So that would, in essence, be our opportunity to renegotiate that agreement and then amend those rates to reflect that change in statute. At least that was what our intent, that's what our discussion was with Verizon, is that as each supplement come forward, we would have those changes reflected in each supplement.
Again, I just go back to, in this, like number 24 talks about the rent, that's what it is, so.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about possibly increasing it. Why not add that in?
A great question. I guess I'm not sure as far as why we wouldn't do that. I think this is the nature of what the statute says today.
But again, it could just be an out that in the event that statute changes, this will be updated, or the parties agree that this will be
Revised. Yeah, we could.
Certainly talk to them about that.
Absolutely.
That's it. So should we approve it or
Yeah, I think if
table
there's,
it?
I would say if there's a desire to see if Verizon will add that language to the agreement, then you should table it.
Motion to table it.
I'll second it.
Motion by Steve, second by Chad to table item number G.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Claims appropriation contract payments, Register B. I have a check to my company on there, so I'll be abstaining from the vote.
Make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to approve. Me abstaining. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We do not have a public hearing. Discussion on city code section 93.21 and 93.22, dogs and cats.
Mayor and council, we're in December, and since we've talked about turkeys and chickens this year, we thought, why not add dogs and
Why not?
cats and more in particular, cats. Actually, the police chief did provide a memo in your council packet just regarding, I think, some concerns that the department has. And wanted to put this on the agenda, at least for discussion, because nothing could be done unless we would change our ordinance. And so I guess I'll hand it over to Tom to, I guess, address some of the concerns that are going on.
Sure. So if you had a chance to review the memo, basically we're just reviewing all of our expenditures over the past year. I suspected over the last couple, 2 to 3 years, that this has been a fairly significant expense for the city, and one that I assumed none of you council members probably realize the actual extent of the cost. So I just thought for 2 reasons. If we could trim $10,000 in an expenditure from our budget, I think it's always worth looking at. But also, I think there's other entities that benefit from the city paying these fees, and I don't know that that's necessarily what we want to be in the business of either. So specifically, every time we bring a cat, by state statute, I believe, to our pound, there's certain vaccinations and that type of thing that the vet has to do. So as soon as we drop that cat off, and if it stays there for the 7 days that's required by ordinance, it costs us $135. So we don't necessarily incur all those expenses with a dog or any other animal because the same vaccinations aren't required. Just so you're aware, our city ordinance says we have to hold on to the animal, no matter what's impounded, for 7 days before it can be either euthanized or adopted out. Now, in the memo, it was the last date of I think the last date we used was through November of 2019. So we up until that time, we had impounded 75 cats. And of those 75 cats, only 9 of those cats were actually returned to an owner. So that leaves 33 that were adopted out. That's, when I say they were adopted out, that was directly from the Animal Medical Center, who's our contracted impound for the city. They took care of that adoption. So if they knew somebody that needed a cat or that type of thing, then they adopted it out themselves.
Do we get any reimbursement?
No, and that's kind of where my point is going. So the city is making a fairly significant payment or expense, and the benefactor is ultimately the people who are either adopting it, or in some cases, the agency that's adopting it out, if it's not the pound.
If they were not adopted, would we still be paying those fees?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's
Correct.
required by state.
Right. So, again, for 2019, I anticipate that expenditure being over $10,000. I think we're within a couple $100 at this point. And just in my short little research that I did regarding the rest of the county, Glencoe and Winstead do not impound cats. Lester Prairie has an ordinance similar to ours that requires them to. My understanding is it's kind of a reluctant thing that they do, but if a citizen demands that they impound the cat, then they impound the cat. I didn't get any information on Silver Lake or Brown or Stewart for that matter, but they're all, well, Stewart anyway is patrolled by the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office does not impound animals either. So another thing that we find happening, not so much with cats, but with dogs, is that people are aware that the county doesn't impound animals. So they are mysteriously found right at the city limits and brought into for us to impound. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but.
By the county?
No, not by the county, by citizens of the county. They better not be.
I seen a deputy's car.
But, you know, we'd still encourage citizens to license their animal or their cat, because it's one of the few ways that we have to identify an owner. And I suspect a lot of these cats that were adopted out actually probably belong to somebody, but the cat, you know, Felix doesn't come home for 3 days. They assume that he's dead, not that he got picked up by the police and brought to the pound. So I'd be more happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding that. And again, I think my desire is just for this to be cats, and in order for us to halt the practice that we have been doing, we would need an amendment to the ordinance.
So then with the change, citizens would just take their cat that they would catch and bring it down to the pound and,
Well, I don't think that would happen at all. I think that ultimately what would happen is the city as a whole would refuse to pay for it. So and I can almost guarantee, I can't say this for certain, but if a citizen brought a cat to the pound and they weren't getting reimbursed for it, they would tell them to turn around and let it go.
sure.
That would be my guess.
And that's, if you're looking for a potential downside, potentially having more cats throughout the
And
community.
that's my concern.
Right, you could end up with a lot of cats, and some cities have trouble with like feral cats and,
Exactly.
Well, yeah,
I mean-
and let me say this. If we have nuisance animals, we're still gonna address that. So if we have feral cats, 30 cats living under a shed somewhere, that type of thing, we're certainly gonna address that. What I'm proposing is the one cat or a certain citizen trapping cats in his backyard and bring them down to us to impound, we would halt that practice. Now, if somebody came to us and said, my neighbor has 30 feral cats on his property, you know, we would still address that issue because it obviously is more of an issue than just someone's cat running in your backyard and maybe doing its business in your sandbox.
So how often do you pick up feral cats?
Well, it's hard to, again, it's hard to determine,
How do you know?
my definition of a feral cat is when we go to pick it up, we can't hardly get near it without getting clawed or bitten.
Yeah.
So that doesn't happen very often. It does happen. And a lot of times, I take that back, it doesn't allow it times, but, excuse me. If a feral cat is brought in, there's a lot of times where the pound or animal medical center can't deal with the animal either, so it will be euthanized almost immediately at that point.
My concern is two things. One, will be increasing the number of cats that are loose out there, and then two, cats are one of the biggest predators or issues with songbirds and birds, and you can look it up and find it in multiple places, and for those reasons, I guess I'm in favor of keeping it the way it is, even though it's expensive. I understand that and appreciate where you're coming from with that, but that's my thought on it.
Well, Chief, when an officer picks up a cat, how much time is expended from the time that the cat's picked up to the pound?
Well, we do have an animal control officer, so between the hours of 6:30 and 2:30 p.m., 6:30 a.m., 2:30 p.m. So if there was an animal call during that time, that person would take care of it.
So he's on staff all the time?
He's on staff, so.
So we're not taking somebody off patrol?
Correct, we're not taking somebody from patrol. Now, if it's after 2:30 p.m., that same call comes in, then it would be an officer that would be taking care of that. I will have to say the majority of our animal calls are handled by our animal control officer, though.
How many dogs do you pick up?
I didn't pull those stats. I can certainly get them to you, but
Well, I'm just from an expense purpose, Andy pulled some numbers for me. Last year, it was about $7,500 in cats. Dogs was about $4,200. So, and then through October this year, we're at about 9,000 for cats, and the dogs are at about 2,300. So, and it's about, what, $135 a
Yeah.
pet animal?
Well, it's $135 for cats, only because of the extra immunizations that take place.
Trying to think, I know we looked at this a couple of years ago.
The expenditure that's for the city from the pound or from the animal medical center isn't as great as it is to the citizen coming to pick it up, because the police department also charges an impound fee and that type of thing. So I think for cats, it's $35 for the first day, and I'm thinking it's like $13 for every subsequent day after that. And I think dogs are a little less on the front end because of the lack of the immunization that takes place. But then, again, $13 or $14 a day for impound.
Need to take their photos and put them on our Facebook page.
Well, and I think
Found.
the other thing that you should realize between cats and dogs is we return a lot more dogs. The ratio of dogs returned to owners is much greater than the ratio of cats to owners.
The owners will look for them or
Right.
ask.
Well,
Right.
I think people think of, well, the traditional dog catcher. So if my dog is running at large and I can't find him, the first call they make is the police department. And then first off, then they're calling us, letting us know their dog's missing. And the majority of the time, we probably have the dog.
So, Tom, you talked about, like, you have let's say it's your neighbor and their cat's always in your yard. Is that something that you guys see a lot, that someone's continually bringing in a cat and saying?
We have certain citizens within the city that do it on a fairly regular basis, more than once or twice a year. One recent example I can think of is 5 cats in a month. So yes, it does happen. And the other thing to think about is cats are still required to be licensed by ordinance, and they're still prohibited from running at large. So in the event we know whose cat it is, in your example, neighbor knows it's my neighbor's cat, we can still cite that person for having their cat running at large. There are other ways to work around that issue. I think the main issue with the cats is there's so many unidentifiable cats out there that ultimately end up going elsewhere.
Okay.
I'm fine with whatever you guys decide, but I just thought this is a great opportunity to maybe.
I guess I side with Steve in saying, cats are predators of all of our birds. I mean, that's what cats do. But I also don't want us to end up with a bunch of feral cats running around our city either. And then we already have a turkey problem. I don't think we need a cat problem besides.
We can train them to eat turkey.
To chase those turkeys away.
Okay.
Would a suggestion be thought of if maybe we let this, do make amendment to this and give a time limit on it, say a year, and see what happens?
Like I said, I'm fine with whatever you guys decide.
Is there,
We've operated this way for many years. So, if you want to try it for a year, that's great. If you ultimately decide that you're just not comfortable with that.
So how would you measure that? That'd be my
You can't.
January 1st to,
date.
That's
a
not
date.
measuring it.
well, you got history, so you could measure it against history.
Measure what?
What are you going to measure, though? They wouldn't be picking up any cats if we.
Yeah, and I think maybe, your only indicator would be is the observations of the citizens. They're saying, okay, now we're seeing a lot more cats, and we're not comfortable with this. I think the other benefit of this discussion tonight is maybe that will spur some discussion among the community too. Maybe you'll receive a few phone calls saying, yeah, I support that, or I don't support that. And maybe that's the biggest benefit of this whole thing.
So let me get this straight. So if we change this and Now the cats are running wild. I'm not bringing them to you, I'm taking them to the pound, right?
Well,
Or nobody's taking.
nobody's taking them.
Nobody's,
Essentially, that's what happens virtually
mean-
everywhere else in the county. You call a law enforcement agency somewhere else in the county and say, I've trapped this cat that keeps coming around my house. They're gonna say, well, let it go.
right.
It's not our responsibility.
The animal shelter in town won't take them?
No, as a matter of fact, I don't,
No, they
this-
won't.
I have no facts supporting this, but I heard that the cat portion out at the fairgrounds is going to go away. So they're probably even less likely to take cats. And and this year, they've only taken 12 of the 75 that we've impounded. I know Dr. Forning does a great job of getting elsewhere. I know he adopts them out to some of the suburbs and that type of thing. But,
Is that the 5 that went to the Humane Society?
no,
That's other
the 5 that
places?
went to Humane Society were 5 different cats, so, and I don't know, the only record that we have is when we look at our invoice, the medical center actually, or the animal medical center does a pretty good job of documenting where that cat went.
But for us, it's the heart of Minnesota.
Correct, but they're
So
not the
these-
Humane Society,
Right, but, so we have a local Humane Society?
not local,
Right.
so I think St. Cloud
They might get
maybe,
sent someplace else.
yeah.
You know, I will say, we've had, you know, I've had a couple residents approach me about some of these practices and have interest of doing some sort of a rescue on their own. I guess I would just encourage if there's some private individuals out there that want to do that. So there's opportunities here, potentially for that to, but right now, there's not a, if you want to say a rescue shelter.
Right.
Within the area.
Could we just maybe put this on the back burner for, say, a month and wait till we hear from people?
I will just say this, you know, this is something staff brought forward. Obviously, there would need to be a direction from the council to change something, so I think Tom has done a good job of kind of sharing some of his concerns. You know, obviously, you guys have some time to think about it. If you feel like it's worth revisiting, then you just have to let myself or Tom know. Because essentially, then what you'd be looking at would be an amendment to the city code.
Well, the thing I look at is we've been used to doing it this way.
Right.
So why not give it a chance to see what happens the other direction by amending it or disbanding it, one or the other? Because you can always go back to it and bring it back in force again. I don't see that as being an issue, and see where it leads to.
I also think it's winter now. I mean, and that's a concern for me. I mean, I'm an animal lover. And if we just say, you're on your own, I mean, is this something we could talk about? Let the public, or let us find out from the citizens what they really want us to do.
Maybe somebody could write a flashy article about it.
Yep, I
See
agree.
it.
Send it over there.
Above the fold and everything.
Right.
As long as I'm not painted out to be the bad guy here, that's all.
Tom
No.
hates cats.
I really don't see the benefit of trying it for a year, because like I said, you know, the only indicator is visually you might see some more cats, and this is something that'll exponentially change over the years. And then the bird thing, that's gonna happen, that's proof, so I don't think it's worth it.
No, and like I said, that's what we had in the discussion. I don't feel that there's a consensus to look at changing anything at this point, and that's, I guess, all that we were simply. So,
You bring in coyotes and get rid of the turkeys and the cats.
wouldn't cause any other problems, right?
Probably not. It's maybe fine.
Well, they're in the bass pond already, so.
They're sneaky.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So is there a desire to just leave it the way it is, or just, or maybe revisit it in a,
Feeling we got from the council is that I think it's something you guys need to think about and talk about, and if there's a desire to bring it forward, then you just need to communicate that to us.
Well, if we hear anything from the video audience, you know, then we can,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's gonna be would be a lot of objections, to be really honest with you, because you see them on real life Hutchinson day after day, you know, someone who's a cat, cat's here, cat's there, you know, so. There's a lot of that on there. There, people are trying to help other people find their animals. Now, I've not tracked it to see if those animals have been relocated with their owners if they had one. But the thing of it is, at least it does get out on that, and they are, you know, really they're doing, I think, hopefully a service not only to the cat, but to the family and to themselves for doing that, so. Or they'll say it's in the pound.
Yep. One quick thing to Chief Gifferson, when is the license for next year available? Are they available?
They're
already?
available now, yeah.
Okay.
So again, any animal,
That's
dogs,
the thing to
cats.
stress.
And that's the important thing too, so if they are licensed and they do happen to run away or get lost, and if we catch them, it's easier for us to return them to the proper.
Correct.
And refresh their deal that they have to have medical records, correct?
Correct. So there is a fee. I'm sorry, I can't recall what that fee is, but if the animal is spayed or neutered or has a microchip implanted, the fee is waived, so it's essentially free of cost. And the other benefit of that is it helps us identify who the animal belongs to, but it also trims a lot of the cost that the owner normally bears, because chances are if we find the animal and are able to contact the owner fairly immediately, we'll just bring the animal home and saves the pet owner probably upwards of $75 to $85.
And it takes like 10 minutes to get a license to it.
Correct, yeah,
Just
it's
walk in
pretty
with
simple
a-
process.
Yeah, medical record and shot record and.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Chief. Review of truth and taxation hearing.
Mayor and council, we do this every year after we conduct our annual truth and taxation hearing, and just at least to provide an opportunity for the council to have any follow-up discussion from that public hearing. Obviously, we had 3 people, then 2 people, and then 1 person in attendance, and we didn't receive any public feedback, at least at that hearing, but just a couple things to note. Since the preliminary budget was first approved, we've had $161,250 reduction in expenses out of the general fund. Some of that was offset by revenue adjustments as well. Our tax levy went from 3.1% in the general fund to 2% in the general fund, with an overall total tax impact of about 2.1% when you factor in the EDA and HRA levies. And as we shared with you, we're estimating that to have about a $38 impact on the home that's valued at about $166,000. And so just want to at least give an opportunity before we look at bringing the final tax levy and budget to the council at your next meeting, at least give you guys the opportunity if there's any discussion or comments, or if you'd like to see anything else between now and I guess next Thursday.
Yeah, that's right, it's next Thursday too. I guess one thought, I had 2 things. One is, again, looking forward, we talked about having a meeting early next year to look at funding going forward, since we're not going to have much new money come in. So one thing, knowing that's the case, I guess, I was wondering about if we kept it at the 3.1, that would save about $50,000 to $70,000, with what would be 1%, would that be of, the general fund would be 51,000. But that could be either set aside, it could go to that one time for this year, could go maybe, it could be set aside, or it could go to the fleet or something like that, or wherever. But then next year, that money then could be added into the budget as part of new money to help stabilize the budget and the tax increase potentially for next year. So it's still money that we're getting, we're just not using it towards the general fund. And then the other thing, you know, we still have a park person coming in. We have a building inspector that isn't being rehired or an opening there. So total number of employees are the same, but again, would it be better to hold off on that and until we have this meeting? You know, the budget could be approved, but maybe it's a contingency to not actually do the hiring until we have this other discussion. And same with the added hours for the HR person.
I mean, we can make either which way work. It's really, that's really kind of, I guess, falls into that policy decision the council, the five of you need to make. I mean, if you want to keep that levy at 3.1% and we set aside that money for some sort of fleet or whatever improvement, then that's fine. I guess that's part of why we have this conversation is to get some of that feedback from the council. And what's your desire, especially when you're looking at tax levy for a policy in regards to that, so.
I don't know, with the new school levy coming on and the county levy being fairly high this year, I think we should leave it low.
And what happens next year? Theirs are still gonna be high.
Yeah.
I know we've got
Andy,
fund, liquor store will be paid off, so there's potentially money there, but,
Andy, what's your take on it?
Well, if we are only levying 2% this year and assume maybe worst case scenario, let's say 5% next year. If you're gonna levy an extra percent this year, just to drop a percent next year, is that what you're thinking, Steve? Just kind of shifting this year's tax levy to next year's just to even it out, stable it over 2 years rather than a 2 and a 5, you're going a 3 and a 4. That's the main goal you're looking at. So overall, it really doesn't impact the general fund, the tax levy, I should say. Tax levy is going to be stable over that 2 years, averaging at the 4.5% or so. But I guess I struggle with padding our reserves this year to be used for something else when we've been communicating to departments to cut our expenditures to keep our levy low. And that's what we did this year. We cut a lot of expenditures out. Our budget's pretty lean. But now on the flip side, we're saying let's levy more taxes, stick that aside just to help us next year, which I don't necessarily agree with. I would rather levy what we need this year and then see how it falls next year. It might be high, but a 2 this year and a 5 next year, is it really that much difference than a 3 and a 4?
then what happens the year after? I know, and that's where we have to have this bigger discussion.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
but
yeah.
we can't have 5% every year. I mean, if, it's been great where, you know, we haven't been getting many people come because I think they understand that we've been doing a good job, but,
Right. I think the biggest issue I see, if you look at wages, that's the big issue. $200,000 for performance increases for 2020. I think that's an area that needs to be looked at. But I think we also need to look back at what happened since the last wage study. We decided we wanted to lead the market. We decided we wanted to shift our pay grades from a maximum of 115% to 120. That had an impact on all our future budgets, all our future levies.
why did we do that though? Because the actual ones, when we, without doing that, people were going to be taking a pay cut in a lot of areas, and
I'm not saying it was wrong that we did that. I'm just saying it's impacting our future budget, so we shouldn't be surprised.
well, and so we've also added about 10 people. So that, it's impacted things too.
Yeah, and this is a conversation I had with Steve prior. The council as a whole needs to have a conversation on what your policy for tax levy comfortability is, because that also plays into services. Because since I've been here, we've added back a lot of the services that were eliminated in early 2000s. We've added those back, and that takes resources to accomplish some of those services. And so that plays into this larger and longer discussion. Steve's correct. This is our last year of, LGA increase, Hutch utility money increase, that we've been allowed to temper off some of those levy increases. But we've shared since 2015 that without those new revenues, to meet our employee costs, we're looking at 4, 5, 6% tax levy increases. And so that's out there. But we haven't had any discussions on services and things that we're doing now. Should we still be doing them in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years out?
Then we need to have those discussions.
Yeah. And then on top of that too is fund balance and all those other things that play into this. So really the question is, coming back to Steve's, the most you can tax this a year is a 3.1% increase.
And we do, my thought is, we'd be setting aside some of the LGA that way, so.
So what does the 1% equate to in dollars?
51,000 in the general fund. We've roughly cut about $78,000, $79,000 in tax levies since September. And we don't need that decision tonight, and we can bring forth 2 different levies for your consideration on next Thursday. I think it's something that obviously you guys need to have a conversation about. So.
Thanks for all the work.
Okay, review of proposed 2020 fee schedule.
We started doing this a couple of years ago, but in advance of our next meeting where this will be on there for final approval, we want to at least have the opportunity to have a discussion now just to see if there's any desired changes to the proposed fee schedule. This was originally sent out to you back in October. Didn't receive a whole lot of feedback. Staff has looked at it. They brought forth their recommended proposals for 2020, and I guess, before we look at bringing a final adoption, is at least give the opportunity to have some feedback from the council on whether or not they'd like to see anything change within the fee schedule. We have included things like the seasonal, for the transient merchant, food vendor, that's been included in there. And then just to, I guess, make sure that we're comfortable with what's in place within the fee schedule for you guys to be looking to approve at your next meeting.
It's, I sent out a note, there are some that haven't seen an increase for a while, and I know it's not making a lot of money probably in all the fees in the whole scheme of things, but also look at parks, for example. They've been pretty diligent about raising fees periodically to help cover their costs, and they like to, what are they bringing in, about 45 cents on the dollar for their programs, and here we're talking about, taxes, which affect everybody. The fees are kind of a user fee for people using those services, so maybe that's a policy thing, but, should there be an increase of some kind, at least every 5 years, or our expenses are going up, so there's some that are tied to, like the building department, or engineering fees, they're tied to costs of doing it, so those will go up anyway, but, there's a lot that it just, flat fees, so why not change them?
Well, most of them are done by the department heads, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and this is always, this, once again, and Steve touched on some of this policy discussion, and, you know, staff looks at it from a couple of different perspectives. Are we covering our costs? And, you know, I guess I should say that's the main factor behind what we're looking at is, are these fees covering our costs? And the directors I've looked at feel like that it is. Those fees are covering those costs. That does not prohibit council from saying, we would still like to charge more for these fees. We've brought forth a recommendation. Some of them you may see that's too high, some are it's too low, and you have every right to adjust those fees. That's just the direction we're looking for.
Personally, I have, what would you say, our directors kind of have the finger on the pulse of what's out there, how to charge stuff, so I would say just, go with their recommendations.
I'm fine with the way it was presented as well.
So am I.
I'd make a motion to adopt the,
Not
we're
for
not
adoption.
adopting.
It's on the next agenda.
I'm sorry.
We just want to make sure we give the opportunity for the council to give us that feedback.
I'm comfortable with it.
So just in retrospect, if those fees from 8 to 10 years ago covered their costs, then how could that still cover the cost now? So that's, I'll
And
just
I
say,
can answer that. Something like the building inspection, we've calculated the hours. Our director's gone in and calculated, this is the hourly cost for our employee to do this for an hour. And for most of that stuff, our employees are in the $35 to $36 an hour range.
isn't that a newer one, or is that, you said the rental or building?
Building, public works, hourly cost of a public works employee is in that same hour amount.
So what you really say, yeah.
Wages, or is there
It's wages and
overhead
benefits,
costs?
that's wages and benefits.
I know, like, my labor rate at 3M is a hell of a lot more than what I get paid, so are we using the right number for those calculations?
labor rate in a business and labor rate for a government are totally different things. I mean,
They don't have to be, it's still cost.
well, if you're billing out money to make money at 3M, we shouldn't be making money on,
I think what they use that for is just part of the overhead that comes into it as well, for and wages, so, or benefits. Same that we got here, we got overhead.
Well, I think our staff is more efficient now. That's probably it, right, Ken?
Well, I mean, if you're asking, you know, we were charging $50 an hour when it was costing us $30 to $35 an hour.
Right.
And, you know, this is where, I'm gonna be honest, we're leaning on you guys. You know, we're charged in a lot of our professions to set costs at covering our expenses.
Right.
If it's the desire of the city to go over and above that, that's the policy the council needs to make.
add with respect to some of the public works items, you know, that are actual tangible items when you look at water meters and such, but, you know, we don't cover the costs in a lot of situations. I think we operate a little bit differently than, you know, planning and zoning and from a building inspection. A lot of our stuff isn't hourly rate applicable in nature, you know? We're never gonna cost the total cost of projects from an assessment standpoint, you know? We know that, I know that's one of them you mentioned, Steve, and, you know, we've been talking about that for some time. We are gonna take a good look at that, but I wanted to wait till after, you know, 2020 and, you know, the Main Street project, and we've already communicated with some people down along South Grade Road that had corner lots in the rec center area. So, yeah, that's coming from an assessment standpoint. You know, otherwise, from cemetery, airport, you know, John, you know, he's got his airport commission. I know you guys, those of you who have sat on that before, you know, John talks about rates and, you know, hangar leases and such, you know, quite a bit with the commission down there. And then cemetery is
Nate, and
always
some that they have raised periodically.
Yeah.
But, yeah, with
And
the
then
new-
cemetery
with the
has
new
on the
hangar.
radar for 2021, you know, he does that on a regular basis, he turns that over.
And actually with the hangar deal, with the new hangar out there, we kind of went through all of them for the deal. One thing, you know, being in business, and Chad, you can speak to this too. I mean, doing stuff for the city is different from doing business for our own businesses. Because you take the rec center or the, you know, aquatic center, we spend money to bring people into town to, you know, go to our restaurants, go to our hotels, saying, you know, when they have a hockey tournament, all, you know, youth hockey tournament, all the hotels are full. Plus, if you wanna go out to eat in town, it's, you know, a long wait, but, you know, we're spending money to make those other businesses thrive too, so.
So, and Ken touched on this, gets back into policy discussion. We're paying about 25% of our costs are coming from assessments. There's nothing that says you can't collect more than that. Now, Ken's gonna tell you, you're gonna run the risk of a property owner concerns with that, just like when we talk about tax levies, and those are all the things that we can collect more, and that's the feedback we're looking from the council on some of those items.
Assessments too, in particular, that by state law is set, you know, where it has to be tied to the
Yep.
value. So it's not just a blank check.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it has to be tied to benefit, which
to
is,
benefit,
yeah, how you define it and how you defend that. And I guess the other thing, you know, and we mentioned it to you, Steve, obviously, in feedback to some of your questions, you know, is the sewer and water rate study, which we're gonna get back into here in 2020, after we, you know, present the 20-year capital improvement plans on those fronts to you guys, and then start to build that model with the consultants. So, you know, that's looming also, you know, and you start talking about all these things, you know, whether it's levy increases or increasing, you know, your assessment revenues on projects, and then possibly utility rate increases. You know, and you already mentioned what other entities are doing from a levy standpoint and such. So, you know, that's also in the background here, you know, to be addressed in the future. I don't know where it's gonna go, but we might have some decisions to make on that front also.
You mentioned the rate study. I'm obviously curious to see, because what was presented versus what you see even as conservation rates in other communities, it's quite a difference, so.
And I think it's more so, yeah, it's not so much conservation rates. I think it's that, Steve, but on the flip side, the other hand, it's, you know, our rate structure has had some loopholes, somewhat borderline flaws to it for a long time. And, you know, I've been well aware of that since I walked in the door, but there was reasoning to why the city built that rate structure for many years. That's actually still in place. So I think it's somewhat right-sizing that a bit too, not just the conservation rates and surcharges and such.
I know that John's not here tonight, but I noticed that the columbarium niches are all going to be one price now. When you look at this, it's like, you know, there used to be upper, lower, middle sections. Now they're all going to be one.
Yeah, we talked about that. That just, it's more of a administrative thing. I think I think we have enough in place now with the additions, a couple of years ago. And, really at a certain point, it's no different than your spot on the ground, in simple terms. It's first come, first serve, and we'll just treat it that way instead of introducing somewhat of an administrative exercise, I
Right.
guess.
The only thing that I'm not totally concerned about this, but I have noticed that the ones that are right on the ground, they're the ones that tend not to be used as much. And I think some of the people maybe, maybe they wanted to save money and they wanted that, I'm just hoping that you can sell all those on the lower part and you just don't end up with the top and no one.
Well, when that's all that's left, when that's all that's left, you're not gonna have a choice. I mean, it's just a first come. It's like, if you want a spot under the tree, get out there and pick it out.
I mean, I understand that. I just, I guess it's all right.
Anything else? Alrighty, moving on. Ordinance number 19-809, the ordinance relating transit, merchant peddlers, and food vendors, second reading and adoption. Mark,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members.
did you ever think we were ever gonna get here?
I'm going to say, please approve this. It's the second reading, there's no changes, so if you could approve it, that'd be great.
I'll make a motion to approve it, Mark.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Motion by Chad, second by Mary to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I think that was the 85th time we've talked about it. Good talk.
Hey, he was on the edge of his seat, I know that. Setting date for city administrator annual performance review?
Yeah, that's me again. So, at the beginning of every calendar year under last contract, we're supposed to be giving him a review. We're asking tonight that you schedule his review. We're thinking about suggesting for the first council meeting in January. So 4 o'clock, January 14th. There isn't a workshop, so we could use that time for this review instead.
So it was 4 o'clock.
Oh, we better start earlier than that, huh? No.
You guys, I'll be here.
Always extended to
Yeah.
the next.
We delay it?
If it needs to be continued, we can do that, or if you need to come back later for a goal setting or whatever, you can do that as well, but at least it'll give you a start to it.
All right, can we have a motion to set that
I'll make that a motion.
Second.
for the 14th at 4 o'clock? Motion by Chad, second by Steve to set that date for the performance review. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
We have the Public Library Board minutes from October 28th, 2019. Chief Gifferson, do you have anything else for us tonight?
As a matter of fact, I do. Just one thing. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the ultimate sacrifice made by one of our own. 30 years ago, this Sunday, Michael Hogan was murdered at JCPenney store, responding to a shoplifting call. So again, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that and put his family in our prayers.
Well, let's have a moment of silence for that. Oh, and Chief Gifferson, you had some new officers?
I do. After about a year, we are finally at full strength as far as our sworn officers. We did hire an individual, and he started on Monday. His name is Taylor Fenrick, and I would like to bring him in front of you at the next meeting to introduce him, if that is acceptable.
That would be wonderful.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kent?
Just briefly, kind of touch on the Highway 15 Main Street front. I know we postponed an item a couple of times. We're still waiting on MnDOT, so just hoping that arrives. Obviously, tonight you ordered the assessment here and really had to, I didn't want to do this, you know, because I fear the numbers that are reflected in that engineer's estimate. Those are based off of an older estimate that was provided now a month and a half ago, and I think that's going to rise once we hear back from MnDOT. So, yeah, we just need to get the process going. We'll have that public hearing at the last council meeting in January. Thus, residents, no, well, not really residents, business owners and such will start getting notices shortly after the holidays on that front. That's it.
Thanks. Mr. Sabora?
Nothing else tonight.
Steve? You got anything else?
Two things. One, we're taking submissions or applications of art for next year's sculpture stroll. So if there's any artists out there locally that is interested, you can go to the sculpture stroll or public arts website, and there's a link or a tab for submitting art for that. But we're looking forward to nice assortment for next year. We've been getting a lot of interest and people that do some nice work, so should be good.
This year's will be hard to beat. It was a good one.
Yeah, it was. And
I
then
think they get better every year, though. I really do. I think
artists
they
are
improve.
starting to know we're on the market or out there now, and they have their network. Travel around to different cities, and so we're making contact with a lot of them too. We're learning. Again, getting out there. So. And then just one thing, as far as the fee schedule, Gary, you mentioned, the rec center, like say, and again, I just go back, if you look at the fee schedule for Park and Rec, that's one that they've been pretty diligent about balancing that. So when I look at that, I kind of wonder about some of the other ones. That's it.
Thanks, Steve. Chad?
I didn't have anything extra.
Mary?
Well, Historic Hutchinson now has 3 new windows installed in the little church. 3 more are coming out now, and there'll be 6 of them that'll be restored and done. So if you haven't driven by, drive by.
All together?
Well, we will have 6 done.
But how many are there?
Ooh, 14?
Mm-hmm.
14 windows.
And actually, Mary, you forgot about the circle.
Oh, the
Well done.
rose. The rose, that's what it's called, the
Yeah.
window at the top, the rose.
And
So,
yeah.
and they do look amazing. They look brand new, but they're not. And also, we attended the Arlie Dazzle Parade in Arlington, and I wanted to thank your group, Chad, that showed up with the float and the queen and the princess, and they did a really nice job representing Hutchinson.
Really lit the float up, so.
Yes.
And the weather was perfect.
Yes.
Versus last year where it was a blizzard,
I know.
so we were fortunate this year.
Yes, it was nice. And Hutch has theirs coming up
Saturday,
this Saturday, right?
which we will also be in. We're not getting the whole float out this time because of some of our royalty can't make it, but, we'll have a float of some kind, so.
Bicycle.
I think we're gonna have a pickup similar to the homecoming parade, so.
But anyway, they did a nice job, and I'm sure Hutch will too. So that's it.
Thanks, Mary. Dave?
We got a long parade route. But it's good. It's something to get started in Hutch by all means. It's gonna be an attraction, I'm sure, from that part of it. I guess basically all I have on my mind is that as the weather gets colder, everybody be more safer in their homes. Make sure your smoke alarms work, your whatever other detectors you have, but make sure that they work. Be careful driving. I found out or heard today that we must be in a good area because they said north of Dassel, the roads are not good. And another person had said north of Kimball are even worse than north of Dassel to Kimball. So if you're out and traveling, take care. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Matt?
One thing I have is just a reminder that our next council meeting is next Thursday. So, if you have anything that needs to get into the packet, deadline will be the end of the day this Friday, this week.
19th?
Packet will go out Monday, so, yeah, it's already, I'll be honest already, so, just over a week, so, that's it.
That's good. That's good.
Well, time of year, we are going to get the sustainability committee up and running, and Steve offered to be the council person on there, and so we're looking at working with John Paulson to get that committee together, so working on that. If you know of anybody that would be interested in it, just, come to the city center and fill out a interest form. And I now adopt 5 fire hydrants, so time of year again. So, please clear out fire hydrants, 3-foot radius around them. Fires, believe it or not, every minute they multiply twice, so, if the guys can get to the fire hydrants and get water supply quickly, that's a big plus for them, so please adopt a fire hydrant. With that, Steve?
You reminded me with the sustainability committee, but, when we were talking about, like the rec center project, would it pay to have a council member on the facility committee? A lot of big dollar projects there, so.
That, who is all on that? Kent and Matt, or
Facility is,
like
JJ
and,
and John, and then I think there's, directors from those with the largest facilities. They're on that, so, let's see, Dan Jocham, I think Dolph's on that.
Barb Hogan. Barb
There's-
sits in too, yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
always, that's a desire of the council to have,
Yeah.
the only thing I'll say, a lot of that happens during the normal business hours, so.
okay.
That's a desire, that's something that you
All
guys
right,
can
we'll
look to appoint.
Look into that.
That's all.
Besides that, everybody stay warm, be safe, out walking. Chad almost took a header today.
I did. Almost froze to death by sliding through the parking lot behind the bike shop, so.
I, actually, when I seen it, I thought you were just break dancing.
Yeah. I move well for a big guy.
Yeah, you do. Look like Scooby-Doo. Well, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Chad, second by Dave to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.